I didn't invite my fiancé to the family trip he paid for because my mom invited my ex. Now he blocked the cards, leaving us with no money in another country. He is inconsiderate. The word declined appeared on the small screen of the card terminal with a hostile red glow. The waiter, an Italian man with an impeccable mustache, looked at us with a patience that was rapidly running out. My mother, Marta, rummaged through her purse and handed him her own card with a nervous smile. The waiter swiped it, declined. My sister Lucia tried hers, declined. We are sitting in a beautiful restaurant in a square in Rome with the empty plates of a very expensive dinner and a half-finished bottle of wine on the table. The air smells of basil and growing panic. Next to me, my ex-boyfriend, Iker, shrugs with a helpless expression. He says he only has enough cash for a taxi. With my heart hammering in my throat, I go out to the street and call Alvaro, my fiancé, the person whose generosity paid for the flights, the luxury hotel, and, until 10 minutes ago, every whim we have had in the last 4 days. When he answers, he does not say hello, he just waits. I ask him what is happening, why the cards are not working. His voice on the other side of the ocean is so cold it could freeze the warm Roman air. He told me that there is nothing wrong with the cards, that he has simply canceled my access to them and to the joint account. I yell at him, I ask him, how can you do this to us? Leave us stranded in another country? Me, my mother, my sister. His response is calm, and that is what hurts the most. He told me, do not worry, the hotel is paid for until tomorrow morning and the return flights are too. You have 24 hours to get to the airport. After that, you're on your own, and he hung up. Now I'm here, standing on a cobblestone street, looking at the silent phone. My family watches me through the restaurant window as if I were their only hope. And all I can think about is Alvaro's cruelty, his absolute lack of empathy. How can a man be so inconsiderate, so controlling? To use money to punish me in this way. For you to understand the magnitude of his betrayal, you need to know how all this began. You need to understand that I had no other choice. I'm not the culprit here. 6 months ago, Alvaro proposed to me. It was perfect, romantic, everything a woman could wish for. He is an incredible man. He is an architect, hardworking, stable, and, most importantly, he adores me. Or so I thought. After the initial excitement, my mother, Marta, had an idea. One last big family trip before I got married. A week in Italy, Rome, Florence, Tuscany. The dream of her life. The only problem, of course, was the money. My mother is a retired teacher, my sister Lucia is an artist and barely makes ends meet. I have a good job, but something of that magnitude was out of our reach. When I told Alvaro about it, he smiled with that generosity that made me fall so in love with him. He said it was a wonderful idea, that he would take care of it. He insisted on paying for the flights and hotels for the 3 of us. He said it was his engagement gift to my family, a way of thanking them for raising me. I was overwhelmed. What kind of man does that? I told him it was too much, but he insisted. He created a joint account for the trip's expenses and gave me a debit card, telling me to use it for meals, museum tickets, trains. He wanted us to have a perfect experience without worrying about anything. And this is where the story takes a turn. My mother, Marta, has a huge heart, but sometimes she is incredibly naive. A few weeks before the trip, she called me, very excited. She had a surprise. She told me, guess who I talked to the other day? Iker. He is going through a tough time. He just broke up with his girlfriend and is very depressed. I told him about our trip to Italy and his face lit up. Poor thing, he needs some joy. So I invited him to come. The silence on the other end of the phone was total. Iker, my college ex-boyfriend. Our relationship was a 5-year drama that ended disastrously. I loved him very much, yes, but we were toxic for each other. My mother, however, always adored him. She never understood why we broke up. She has always kept in touch with him, behind my back most of the time. My first reaction was a firm no. I told her it was crazy, that Alvaro was paying for everything, that it was a family trip. How could we show up with my ex? But my mother started to cry. She told me I did not understand how bad Iker was doing, that she had offered it to him, that she could not back out now because it would break his heart. She accused me of being selfish, of having no compassion. She told me, "What does it matter? Alvaro is not even going to be there. He does not have to find out." And there was the dilemma. On one hand, loyalty to my fiancé, the man generously funding this dream. On the other, my mother, manipulating me with her tears, putting me in an impossible position. What was I supposed to do? Break my mother's heart and humiliate Iker, who was apparently on the verge of a breakdown, or simply omit a small detail from Alvaro to keep the peace? I chose peace. I chose to protect my mother's feelings. I decided that what Alvaro did not know could not hurt him. It was just a trip. Iker would pay for his own flight, and the rest of the expenses would be diluted in Alvaro's generous budget. It was a white lie, a necessary omission to avoid unnecessary family drama. It was not my fault, it was the situation my mother had created. I was just trying to manage it. The day we left for the airport was incredibly tense. My sister Lucia looked at me with disapproval, but said nothing. My mother acted as if everything was perfectly normal, chattering with Iker, who looked anything but depressed. In fact, he looked quite good, more fit, more self-confident than the last time I saw him. During the first few days in Rome, the situation was strange, but manageable. I kept my distance from Iker, focusing on my mother and my sister. When Alvaro called each night, I would go out onto the balcony of my hotel room to talk to him. I told him about the Colosseum, about the incredible pasta, about how happy my mother and sister were, and every word of gratitude he said to me felt like a small thorn of guilt. But the guilt was unfair. Why should I feel guilty? I had not invited Iker. I was trapped. I was making a sacrifice, enduring an uncomfortable situation to make my mother happy. In my mind, it was an act of filial love. Iker, for his part, seemed to interpret the situation differently. He started to look for moments alone with me. He reminisced about old times. He told me how much I had matured, how incredible I looked. It was subtle, but it was unmistakable flirting. I ignored it, I deflected it with humor, but I felt increasingly uncomfortable. My mother, of course, was delighted. She looked at us both with shining eyes, as if she were watching the reconciliation of her dreams. The turning point occurred on our fourth night. We went to dinner at that restaurant in the square. The wine was flowing. My mother was telling embarrassing stories from my childhood. Iker was sitting next to me and, at one point, under the table, his hand brushed my knee. I pulled it away immediately, giving him a furious look, but the damage was already done. I felt dirty, an accomplice to something I did not want. It was then that my sister Lucia, who had been drinking more than she should have and watching everything with hawk eyes, decided she had had enough. She raised her glass and said, "I want to propose a toast to Alvaro, the wonderful, generous, and completely oblivious man who paid for this awkward romantic reunion." The silence that fell over the table was deafening. My mother gasped, Iker turned pale. And at that precise moment, like in a horror movie, my phone rang. It was Alvaro, making his nightly FaceTime call. My hand was shaking as I answered. I put on my brightest smile and turned the phone to show only my face. But Lucia, in an act of pure sabotage, snatched the phone from my hand. "Hello, Alvaro," she said with an overly cheerful voice. "We are all here toasting to you. Look, even Iker says hello." And she turned the phone, showing my fiancé the entire table. His smiling face on the screen froze. His eyes went from Lucia's smiling face to my mother's horrified face and finally rested on Iker, sitting next to me. He said nothing. His expression became completely neutral. Then the call dropped. I tried to call back once, twice, 3 times. He did not answer. And that is when we asked for the bill and the card was declined. Lucia, in her selfish attempt to be the bearer of truth, had not only exposed me, she had condemned us all. But deep down, the fault was not hers or mine. The fault was Alvaro's for reacting in such a childish and disproportionate way. Standing on that Roman street, with the buzz of Vespas and the voices of tourists all around me, the call to Alvaro felt surreal. It was not a conversation. It was a sentence. When he finally answered, his initial silence was the most terrifying part. There was no anger in his voice, no shouting, just an icy void. When I asked him what was wrong with the cards, his response was so calm it sent a shiver down my spine. He said, "The cards are fine. Your access to my money is not." I tried to explain. The words tumbled out of my mouth. I told him it was not my fault, that my mother had invited him, that Iker was depressed, and that I was trapped in an impossible situation. I told him it meant nothing, that it was a favor for my mother. His response left me speechless. He said, "I understand, but it seems there is a fundamental misunderstanding. You thought my money was an unconditional gift. It was not. It was an investment in our future family, a family based on trust and respect. And you used my investment to finance a vacation with your ex-boyfriend. The trust and respect have evaporated, therefore, the investment is withdrawn." Investment? That is how he saw his gift, as a business transaction. The audacity of that word infuriated me, completely overshadowing my own deceit. I yelled that he was inconsiderate, a controller. I said, "How can you leave us stranded here? My mother, my sister." I was using the most powerful weapon I had, family guilt, but it did not work. He replied, "Your mother made the decision to invite him. Your sister made the decision to expose everything, and you made the decision to lie to me for weeks. It seems you are all adults capable of making decisions. Now you can face the consequences together." And then he gave me his ultimatum. The hotel and the return flights were paid for. We had 24 hours. After that, it was our problem. When he hung up, I felt a mixture of panic and a strange, twisted justification. This proved who he really was. He was not the generous and kind man I thought he was. He was a petty and calculating man who used money as a weapon to get his way. The moment he did not get what he wanted, the moment things were not perfect, he withdrew his support. What kind of life partner does that? I went back to the restaurant. My mother's face was a picture of fear. Lucia finally seemed to realize the gravity of what she had done, and for the first time, she did not look proud of it. Iker avoided my gaze, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the tablecloth. I explained the situation to them. I told them Alvaro had cut us off. My mother's reaction was immediate. She started to cry, saying that Alvaro was a monster, a cruel man. Lucia remained silent, pale. Iker mumbled something about looking for an ATM, although we all knew he did not have the funds to pay for such a dinner. In that moment, looking at them, I realized the truth. I was the victim here, a victim of my mother's naivety, a victim of my sister's sabotage, and, above all, a victim of my fiancé's controlling and ruthless nature. I had done nothing wrong. I had only tried to keep everyone happy, and as a result, I was being punished in the most humiliating way possible. And so we returned to the present, to the Roman Square, with an unpaid bill and an uncertain future. The final humiliation was that Iker had to call his parents in the middle of the night to get an emergency transfer to pay for dinner. My mother's grand romantic gesture turned into her son asking his parents for money. Pathetic. We managed to get back to the hotel. The night was a hell of silent accusations. My mother was no longer crying. She just looked at me with reproachful eyes, as if I had mishandled the situation. Lucia said nothing, locked in guilt or indifference. I do not know. Iker stayed in his room. The family unit that I had tried to protect with my lie had been shattered. Now, with the first light of dawn coming through the window, I have absolute clarity. Alvaro thinks he has taught me a lesson. He thinks he has proven his point, but the only thing he has proven is that he is not the man I can spend the rest of my life with. A true partner does not react like that. A true partner would have called, would have yelled, would have demanded an explanation. There would have been a fight, yes, but we would have talked. He did not give me that chance. He jumped straight to the nuclear option, financial punishment. He treated me not as his future wife, but as an employee whose budget is withdrawn for bad behavior. His action was not about the lie, it was about control. He could not stand the idea of something on his perfect trip not being under his control. Iker's presence was a variable he could not control, and his response was to burn it all down. What will happen in the future? If I make a decision he does not like, will he cut off my access to our house? If I fight with his mother, will he cancel my health insurance? He has shown me his true colors. When he feels betrayed, he does not seek reconciliation, he seeks annihilation. So yes, we are in a terrible situation. We will have to beg friends and family for money to survive until our flight tomorrow. The humiliation will be immense, but in a way, I'm grateful. Alvaro, with his act of cruelty, has opened my eyes. I thought I was marrying a generous and secure man, but I have realized that his generosity was just a tool of control. I would rather be without money in Rome than be chained to a man who believes his love and support can be turned on and off like a switch. I'm not the one to blame for this disaster. I'm the one who has finally seen the truth. Popular comments from Reddit. Anonymous user 1. You used your fiancé's money to take your ex on vacation to Italy without telling him. And when he caught you and cut you off, he is the inconsiderate one. I cannot. I really cannot with this level of delusion. Protagonist's response. You do not understand the nuance. I did not use his money to take my ex. I was forced to allow my ex to come on a family trip so as not to destroy my mother. And Alvaro's reaction was not a response to a lie, it was an abuse of financial power. There is a big difference. Anonymous user 2. Your fiancé did not leave you stranded. He made sure you had a roof over your head and a flight back. That is much more than you deserved. He gave you the consequences of your actions in a very controlled way. He is not a monster, he is a man with boundaries, and you crossed them in a big way. Anonymous user 3. Your mother is a manipulator, your sister is a saboteur, and you are a liar. The only sane person in this story is Alvaro. This is probably the best investment he has ever made, because he spent some money to find out who he was going to marry before it was too late. Protagonist's response. It is easy to blame my family and me. It is harder to see the truth. A man who truly loves forgives, fights, communicates. He does not use his bank account as a weapon. He showed me that his love has a price and conditions, and I, luckily, discovered that I'm not willing to pay it. Update 1. The journey back home was the longest flight of my life. 20 hours of humiliating silence. No one spoke. My mother looked out the window, pretending the landscape of clouds was fascinating. Lucia had her headphones on, although I'm sure she was not listening to music. Iker, who for some reason got a seat 3 rows ahead, did not turn around even once. It was like traveling with 4 strangers who shared a shameful story. When we landed, the farce of unity completely broke. Everyone took their suitcase and went in a different direction. Not a goodbye, not a see you later. Nothing. I was left alone in the terminal with 2 suitcases and a phone with no messages. Reality hit me with the force of a freight train. My key did not work on the door of the apartment I shared with Alvaro. He had changed the locks. I had to call a locksmith, humiliate myself by explaining the situation, and pay a fortune to have the door of my own home opened. Inside, half of the things were gone: his clothes, his books, his toiletries. And on the kitchen table, there was a box with my belongings from his side of the closet and an envelope. Inside the envelope, there was not a love letter or an angry note. There was a legal document, a notification from a lawyer to schedule a meeting to discuss the dissolution of our engagement and the division of assets, and a sticky note attached to the top. It said, I have transferred money to your personal account to cover your share of this month's rent. I suggest you start looking for another place to live. Cold, efficient, ruthless. My friends, the few I have dared to tell an edited version of the story, do not understand. They say I should apologize, beg him. They say I made a terrible mistake. Do they not see that his reaction is the real mistake? Do they not see that this is not a proportionate response to a lie, but a calculated campaign to destroy and humiliate me? I spoke to my mother on the phone. She cried, of course, but not for me. She cried for herself, for the ruined trip, for the shame. She told me, maybe if you had handled the call with Alvaro differently. As if I had any control over my sister's sabotage or my fiancé's psychopathic reaction. My own mother, the cause of this whole mess, is now blaming me. I'm alone in this apartment that no longer feels like mine, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that has evaporated. Everyone wants me to be the villain. They want me to regret my lie. But the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced of the opposite. My lie was a mistake, yes, a stupid mistake born of weakness. But his reaction, his calculated cruelty, is not a mistake, it is his character. And it has shown me that his love was as conditional as a clause in a contract. He did not love me, he wanted a perfect version of me that fit his rules. And the moment I went off script, he decided to cancel the production. Final update: 2 months have passed. 2 months of a gray and miserable existence. I moved out of the apartment, of course. I now live in a smaller, darker place that smells of the loneliness of its former tenants. The meeting with the lawyers was a nightmare. Alvaro's lawyer was polite but relentless. They discussed the return of the engagement ring as if they were talking about the division of some furniture. I sat in silence, feeling like an object in my own life. The breakup with my family has been almost worse than the breakup with Alvaro. Lucia sent me a long message apologizing, saying she acted on impulse and that she deeply regrets it. I did not reply. What is the use of forgiveness when the damage is already done? With my mother, it is an icy silence. We talk from time to time, superficial conversations about the weather and health. Neither of us dares to mention Italy. She has never taken responsibility, and I will never forgive her for putting me in that position. The final event, the one that has forced me to write this, was a chance encounter last week. I went to an art gallery for a friend's opening. I needed to feel normal, to be around people. And then I saw him across the room. Alvaro was talking to a small group of people, smiling. He looked thinner, but he looked good. At peace. I hid behind a sculpture, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to run to him, to yell at him, to demand a real confrontation, but I was paralyzed. And as I watched him, a woman approached him and gently touched his arm. He turned and smiled at her. A different, softer smile. I could read her lips as she said something to him, and then they both laughed. She was not a stunning model, she was a normal woman with an intelligent smile. They seemed comfortable together, as if they shared a secret language. I left the gallery without him seeing me. I walked aimlessly through the cold streets, and on that walk, the final truth settled over me like a shroud. It was never about Iker, it was never about the lie. Those were just the excuses. Alvaro had been looking for a way out. My family with its chaos, my mother with her manipulations, my sister with her drama, me with my inability to set firm boundaries. It was all too much for him. He did not want to marry me, he wanted to marry an idea of me. And when he saw the whole package, with all the mess that my family implied, he decided it was not worth it. The story of Italy was not the cause of our breakup, it was his perfect excuse. He gave me a legitimate reason to abandon a ship that he already felt was sinking. He let me be the villain so he could come out as the reasonable and hurt victim. It is easier to tell people, my fiancé lied to me and went on vacation with her ex, than to say, her family is too complicated and I do not want to deal with that for the rest of my life. So this is the conclusion. He will move on, probably with that quiet woman who will not give him any trouble. My family will remain broken, and I will be left with this truth that no one else will see. I was rejected not for what I did, but for who I'm and where I come from. He did not have the courage to admit it, so he staged this whole theater of cruelty to justify his escape. He did not break my heart because of my lie, he broke my heart because he never loved me enough to accept all of my chaos. And that is a much deeper wound.